So you are on mute, sir. Sir, we can't hear you. You are on mute, sir.
Yeah, please repeat.
Sir, there is someone who has joined from your
Yes,
ID.
yes, 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 yes. She's Priyanka Tripathi, and she has joined from my ID. Yes, my wife.
So, sir, should we like, okay, she's gone.
No, no, no. She will be connecting. She will be connecting. That's not an issue. I know.
Okay, just hold on.
Hmm.
Okay, anyway. Okay, good evening to all of you. And I am Dr. Sharbhanu Ghosh, and I am the Customer Relations Manager at J-Mitra and Company. And I welcome all of you to this edition of J-Mitra Scientific Webinar. It's indeed a delight for all of us to participate here for this particular scientific session. And today our theme of this particular webinar is on the diagnostic approaches of CRP and procalcitonin. And today we have our distinguished speaker, Dr. Agnijit Palit, who joins us all the way from Lucknow, Apollo Supermedics. Good evening, sir. It's an honor to have you
Good
over
evening.
here
Good
today.
evening. Yes.
And I would like to apprise to all the participants that Dr. Palit will be taking on the floor for the presentation. And during the course of presentation, I presume everybody can have some queries. So please feel free to put down your questions on the chat box. We will take up in the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Also to apprise you that this particular webinar is in collaboration with TIDE 2021, which will be coming in December. So please stay tuned for that. So before I open the house to Dr. Palit, a quick introduction to our esteemed speaker. Dr. Palit has done his MBBS from Maulana Azad Medical College, and he has, from Neil Ratan Sharkar Medical College, and he did his MD in microbiology in Maulana Azad Medical College. He has done his microbiology, and then he went on to publish numerous works in scientific papers, and he has also presented it in international forums all the way in Germany and elsewhere. And currently he is also engaged in infectious diseases and microbiological work. And he is currently working as the consultant and microbiologist at Apollo Hospitals in Lucknow. So without any ado, Dr. Palit, welcome on board, and I open the floor to you, sir.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Dr. Sharbhanu, for introducing me. It's a great pleasure for me on this day to be a part of this presentation in association with J-Mitra and Company, with whom we have a long association spanning several years because of their immense contribution in the field of diagnostics, especially in relation to infectious diseases and microbiology. So today's discussion is on the diagnostic challenges and approaches we face while evaluating a patient with suspected with regards to biomarkers like CRP and PCT. So without any further delay, I would like to just begin my presentation. So, yeah. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So, as we all know, I will be speaking about the evolution of CRP and PCT testing, diagnostic approach, and challenges. So, to start with a brief introduction on what are basically biomarkers, what are they meant for. So, as I have discussed, CRP and PCT, that is procalcitonin, are important inflammatory biomarkers commonly used in the diagnosis of sepsis. As per the National Institute of Health, biomarkers are defined as a broad subcategory of medical science, which are objective indications of a medical state as observed from outside the patient, which can be measured accurately and can be reproduced. CRP or C-reactive protein is the acute phase protein that is synthesized in the liver under the stimulation of interleukin-6 during infections or other inflammatory conditions, whereas procalcitonin is a protein consisting of 116 amino acids, and it is the prohormone of calcitonin or thyrocalcitonin as we know, secreted by different types of cell from numerous organs in response to pro-inflammatory stimulation. We will be discussing a bit in detail about the release and other biochemistry parameters of procalcitonin in the future slides. So to begin with, first we need to be clear about the definitions of some frequently used terms like SIRS. So what is SIRS? SIRS or systemic inflammatory response syndrome. This actually encompasses a variety of complex findings that result from the systemic activation of the innate immune response. The parameters which are used to diagnose SIRS are two or more of the following, like fever or hypothermia, tachycardia greater than 90 beats per minute, tachypnea greater than 20 respiratory rate per minute, hyperventilation, that is PaCO2 less than 32 mm mercury, and altered white blood cell count, that is TLC less than 4,000 or greater than 12,000 per cubic millimeter blood, or the presence of greater than 10% immature neutrophils, which we also call as band forms. Now, what is sepsis? Sepsis is SIRS resulting from any infection, whether it might be bacterial, viral, fungal, or parasitic. And severe sepsis or septic shock is sepsis which is associated with at least one major organ dysfunction, hypoperfusion, or hypotension. So, with the basic terms clear, we move ahead. Now, what was the role of the introduction of procalcitonin or the new generation biomarkers? Earlier, that is many years ago, many years ago, even before the advent of CRP, people used to rely on total leukocyte count or the erythrocyte sedimentation rate as the biomarkers for inflammation. But as we all know, ESR is highly non-specific, has poor sensitivity and specificity, and TLC on the other hand also has its innate disadvantages. Microbiological cultures, which are supposed to be the gold standard for diagnosis of sepsis, which shows the direct evidence of bacterial growth, they have the disadvantage that they are time consuming, do not indicate host response to infection, and can be false positive and negative. That is why the need for sensitive and specific biomarkers was there. Procalcitonin in recent years has been the focus as a specific and early marker for systemic inflammation and infection, both in children as well as adults. Because baseline PCT testing in conjunction with the clinical condition of the patient can tell if an infection is bacterial or not. I will delve into details why PCT is raised only in bacterial infection mainly. So now coming to the biochemistry and physiology of procalcitonin. Procalcitonin is actually transcribed by the calcitonin 1 gene on chromosome 11. The product of this gene is actually pre-PCT or pre-procalcitonin, which undergoes proteolytic cleavage producing procalcitonin. And this procalcitonin is further processed to the mature calcitonin molecule. As I have said that calcitonin is the hormone secreted by the C cells of the thyroid gland. So transcription and translation of CALC1 gene is normally confined to the thyroid C cells and to a lesser extent to the other neuroendocrine cells. However, the production of precalcitonin is activated in all parenchymal tissues of the body in response to bacterial infection, either directly by the bacterial LPS or lipopolysaccharide and indirectly by the various inflammatory cytokines like IL-6, TNF-alpha and interleukin-1 beta. It has to be noted that these other tissues of the body other than the C cells of the thyroid does not have the ability to cleave procalcitonin molecule into its mature form calcitonin. That is why in inflammatory responses or in inflammatory cascades there is accumulation of procalcitonin in the body, and this leads to the elevated levels of procalcitonin in infection. So how does procalcitonin is produced? If we see the timelines, at first cytokine stimulated monocytes release PCT in low quantities in less than 2 hours after the inflammatory response starts. This is however limited, but this leads to the PCT burst which is initiated in all storage tissues, mostly the parenchymal tissues, and this explains why extreme concentrations of procalcitonin can be generated in contrast to physiological conditions. This procalcitonin burst will continue as long as the stimulus for synthesis exists. So PCT, it has been said, is raised mainly in bacterial infections. So why is this so? This is due to the fact that if we consider viral infection, they usually go by the interferon gamma pathway. So interferon gamma has a direct influence on PCT release as it blocks its synthesis. That is why PCT is not raised in viral infections but is raised mainly in bacterial infections because it follows the interleukin 1 beta interleukin 6 pathway. So coming to shortly about the various procalcitonin assays available. So all of you know that there is a term known as Brahms PCT because PCT assay was first standardized by the Brahms group. So initial it was a manual luminometric assay, and this further research a more sensitive and rapid automated assay known as the Brahms PCT crypto assay was developed by Thermo Fisher, Germany. Nowadays, it is said that the most sensitive and specific assays of PCT are the Brahms PCT assays, and several companies across the globe have partnered with the Brahms group and use their patented product to use it on their own platforms by various mechanisms. It might be ELISA, it might be alpha like the bioMero does, it might be chemiluminescence, it might be electrochemiluminescence. Also, a latex enhanced immunotargetometric assay is also available by Diazyme Laboratories USA. Apart from this, a POCT, that is point of care test by the name of Brahms PCT-Q is also available, which is a test strip based on immunochromatographic technique. Here, a positive result is given by a colored band within 30 minutes of application of serum, and the results are reported as less than 0.5, 0.5 to 2, 2 to 10, and greater than 10 microgram per liter of blood. So basically this is a semi-quantitative assay. If we speak about the PCT microELISA, as we all know, it is based on the sandwich immunoassay principles where the microvells are coated with antibodies against human procalcitonin. After the addition of sample, we add the enzyme conjugate where the anti-PCT antibodies are labeled with horseradish peroxidase enzyme. So basically the procalcitonin which is present in the serum is sandwiched between two anti-PCT antibodies, one which is already coated in the microvell and the other which is labeled with the horseradish peroxidase enzyme. After this binding occurs, after this sandwich formation, incubation is followed by a washing step, and the color reaction is started by the addition of substrate, and the color intensity, like in all other ELISAs, is directly proportional to the concentration of procalcitonin in the sample. So yeah, so if we see the diagnostic approach in procalcitonin testing, if we speak about the level, so it is less than 0.05 microgram per liter in normal individuals. So PCT level less than 0.5 will mean that the systemic infection is unlikely, however local bacterial infection is possible. But we need to exclude caution because if it is measured very early in the inflammatory process, that is less than 6 hours, the value might not be high. So it will be prudent to repeat it if there is high suspicion of sepsis. If the PCT level is greater than 0.5 but less than 2, then systemic sepsis or systemic infection is possible, and the patient should be carefully monitored by reassessing and again re-examining, re-measuring the PCT within another 6 to 24 hours. At levels of greater than 2 and less than 10, the systemic infection is very likely and there is high risk for progression to septic shock until and unless there is an alternative diagnosis. If the procalcitonin level is greater than 10 microgram per liter, then it is almost importantly exclusively due to the severe bacterial sepsis or septic shock. Now, PCT has the advantage that PCT levels can decide whether or not to start antibiotics in case of bacterial infection. So this is a brief guideline that if the PCT concentration is less than 0.25, then we discourage antibiotic therapy. Whereas between 0.25 to 0.5, we discourage antibiotics, but we keep in mind that the patient might have sepsis if the sample is taken too early. So it should be repeated after 6 to 12 hours. At greater than 0.5 and less than 1, antibiotics are encouraged, and obviously at greater than 1, antibiotics are strongly encouraged. Now PCT also has a prognostic value because it also indicates when to stop antibiotics and whether to stop antibiotics or not in case of bacterial sepsis. This can be seen in the following table, that if on serial PCT measurements, if we find that the PCT level is less than 0.25 or decrease is greater than 90%, then we need to stop antibiotic therapy if the patient is clinically improving. Whereas if it is 0.25 to less than 0.5 and the decreasing level is greater than 80%, then stopping antibiotic therapy is encouraged. However, it should be noted that in both these cases, the antibiotic therapy should be continued if the patient is clinically unstable, and always there is a clinical re-evaluation which should be advised. If the levels are greater than 0.5 and the decrease is less than 80%, the antibiotic therapy needs to continue, and at greater than 1, the antibiotic therapy is strongly encouraged. Again, clinical re-evaluation is always needed in all cases, and repeat PCT should be done every 1 to 2 days. I will speak about this timeline, why it is advised every 1 to 2 days in the coming slides. It must be noted that if the procalcitonin level remains high, then we should consider treatment failure as an option. We should think whether the treatment is really working or not. Coming to C-reactive protein, C-reactive protein, also known as pentraxin-1, is a non-glycosylated protein in the pentraxin family. It also includes other proteins like pentraxin-2 and pentraxin-3. It was named because its ability to bind and precipitate the C polysaccharide of pneumococcus. It's an alpha globulin of molecular weight 110 to 140 kilodalton. CRP, as I have said in the previous slides, is synthesized by the liver in response to inflammatory cascades, and its normal constituent in serum and plasma is less than 3 mg per liter. CRP is an acute phase reactant, and the detection of CRP is a very reliable and sensitive indicator of the inflammatory process than the ESR. This I have discussed. Measurement of CRP by high sensitive CRP assays has the additional value that it can predict risk of progression of myocardial disease along with other myocardial markers like myoglobin, CKMB, troponin I and troponin T. CRP assays, coming to CRP assays, semi-quantitative CRP assays is done usually by latex agglutination. This of course is semi-quantitative in nature. Again, there's a method known as latex enhanced nephelometry. There's immunotargetometry, which is widely used, and there's the same sandwich ELISA principle which is used in PCT also. Here, similar to the PCT case, microvales are coated with streptavidin, sample is added to the microvale, and then we add the enzyme conjugate, which is anti-CRP antibodies labeled with HRPO and phosphatidylse peroxidase. There's sandwich formation, and then incubation and washing, and the color reaction, the intensity of the color is directly proportional to the concentration of CRP in the sample. If we see the concentration of high sensitivity CRP in correlation to the inflammatory diseases and cardiovascular disease risk, so it is said that less than 1 mg per L will be low cardiovascular disease risk. Between 1 to 3, it will be moderate risk. Greater than 3, there is high cardiovascular disease risk, but there is no inflammation. At greater than 10, it indicates inflammation, bacterial or viral. And at greater than 50 mg per L, it generally indicates serious bacterial infection. Now, one thing has to be kept in mind that unlike PCT, CRP is raised in viral infections also. So, of the viral infections in recent times, the entire world is dealing with COVID-19. So, in COVID-19, CRP's role has once again emerged as a very important biomarker, because in COVID-19, it being a bacteria, it being a viral infection, PCT does not have much role there. So, based on numerous studies, I have quoted the studies at the bottom. So, systemic inflammation as measured by C-reactive protein is strongly associated with risk of venous thromboembolism and acute kidney injury, critical illness and mortality in COVID-19. Also, elevated level of C-reactive protein may be an early marker to predict risk of severe COVID-19 disease. Now, CRP, what it does is preferably binds to phosphocholine expressed highly on the surface of the damaged cells, and this binding activates the classical complement pathway, which modulates the phagocytic activity to clear microbes. And when the inflammation or tissue damage is resolved, the CRP concentration falls. This makes it a useful marker for monitoring disease activity. Again, in the early stage of COVID-19, CRP levels are correlated positively with the lung lesions, the diameter of the lung lesions, and could and could thus reflect the disease severity. Admission CRP level greater than 40 mg per liter, that is greater than 40 mg per L, may be used by the treating clinicians as an early warning for enhanced care and patient-centered decision making. The chances of developing, it has also been said that the chances of developing severe symptoms in COVID-19 is increased by 5% for every 1 unit rise in CRP levels in people with COVID-19. Now, coming to the comparison between the two biomarkers. So, if we see procalcitonin, so procalcitonin in systemic inflammation, the rise occurs in 2 to 4 hours, reaches peak concentrations in 8 to 24 hours and persists for as long as the inflammatory process continues. The half-life of procalcitonin is 24 hours. That is why I have told in the previous slide that it should be measured daily. As the half-life is 24 hours, so daily measurement, that is measurement every 1 to 2 days, every 24 to 48 hours, will help monitor the response of the patient to the treatment. However, in CRP, it takes a longer time to rise. It takes 12 to 24 hours to rise and remains elevated for up to 3 to 7 days. That is why daily measurement of CRP does not have much value. It is usually measured at an interval of 3 to 4 days. That is why PCT as comparison to CRP has the potential advantage of earlier disease prognosis as well as better monitoring of disease progression. PCT has been found superior to CRP both in terms of sensitivity as well as specificity in the differentiation of bacterial septicemia from non-infectious systemic inflammatory response syndrome. And PCT levels are raised much earlier during an infectious process, as I have told earlier, 4 to 12 hours as compared to 24 to 38 hours in case of CRP, which facilitates earlier diagnosis. PCT can be used as a prognostic marker, as I have told. Its levels correlate directly with the bacterial load and the severity of infection, and its plasma elimination half-life of 24 to 35 hours versus 48 hours of CRP, it makes daily measurement of PCT levels very significant. And it is said that a 30 to 50% daily drop in circulating PCT levels indicates that the infection is well controlled. Multiple randomized trials have been made across the world in ICU patients, and it states that bacterial septicemia, in patients with bacterial septicemia, PCT measurements can guide the duration of antibiotic therapy, as I have shown in the charts. So, a brief comparison in tabular form between the two. So, each has its inherent advantages and disadvantages. It must be noted that the PCT level testing, that is PCT assays, are expensive, whereas CRP assays are cheaper. But there are few points to remember. This will also tell us what are the diagnostic challenges faced by us while testing for CRP and PCT. It must be noted that the CRP levels are not influenced by a renal disease or hepatic disease, whereas the PCT levels can be influenced by the renal disease as well as hepatic disease. Another thing is that in most autoimmune diseases, levels of PCT are not raised, whereas the levels of CRP can be raised in autoimmune diseases, barring some exceptions like in case of Kawasaki syndrome, in Goodpasture syndrome, Wegener's granulomatosis, ANCA positive vasculitis, paraneoplastic syndromes. These are the cases where the levels of PCT are raised. Again, CRP is mainly a diagnostic marker, where PCT is both a diagnostic as well as a prognostic marker. This is because of the shorter elimination half-life of procalcitonin. Both have some causes of increase due to causes other than infection, like can be raised in trauma and surgery, whereas PCT can be raised in heat stroke, in renal insufficiency, in liver cirrhosis. So, in short, to end the discussion, both CRP and PCT are important biomarkers for inflammation. Both have their role, but the thing to be noted is that PCT is almost exclusively raised in bacterial infections, whereas the CRP is raised both in bacterial as well as viral as well as fungal infections also. Regarding prognostic activity, PCT has a better advantage because of its shorter elimination half-life, and that is why PCT has an important stewardship also, because its levels and its serial measurement can help the antimicrobial stewards to judge and decide on the duration as well as the dose of the correct antibiotics which are required. C-reactive protein on the other hand has immense role in COVID-19 because of its inherent tendency to rise both in bacterial as well as viral infections. And based on numerous studies which I have quoted, CRP level testing in COVID-19 is very advantageous because it is not only an indicator that each patient will progress to severe COVID-19 pneumonia, it will also indicate that which patients will have a larger diameter lung lesions. So this is in short a brief discussion about PCT and CRP. I would now request Dr. Sarvanu to allow any questions which may be asked by the and the other guests. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a wonderful presentation, and you have given this information which was on the basic front. So I think everybody might have got enlightened with the information over there. Obviously, there are a few questions. We'll go one by one. First of all, the basic part is, Dr. you have said about the basic epidemiology and the, you can say, testing of CRP and PCT. Okay. Now,
yes.
If I have to take PCT in the beginning, right, all the way from sepsis and everything, traditionally it has been a marker before the operations and in pre-operative and post-operative care. Okay.
Yes.
Now, in the recent times, it has been published that PCT test has been, what you can say, taken up so vividly, both in the pediatric level also, and as well as in the neonatal and prenatal cases also. How do you think that, what are the vulnerable age groups as of today, compiled with the tropical diseases? How much relevance is there PCT, and what are the vulnerable age groups?
Well, India is a land of tropical diseases. As we all know, there are a number of tropical diseases, and vulnerable age groups will be the neonates, the pediatric, as well as the oldest population. But the thing is that which I want to stress is that PCT is important in all the age groups, because whenever a patient comes to the emergency or to the ICU with suspected sepsis, earlier what used to happen is that before, without testing anything, people started antibiotics. Now we can, by the testing of the, first we need to take the history of the patient. So if already 6 to 12 hours have elapsed from the onset of the inflammatory episode, we can have a baseline PCT testing and we can decide whether the infection is bacterial or not. This will have an immense role in the deciding on the future course of action, because it will differentiate bacterial as well as from the non-bacterial cause of increase, and it will also help in guiding antibiotic therapy, both in case of the pediatric age group, which are vulnerable, and also the extremes of people with extremes of age, that is more than 60 with comorbidities like diabetes, like hypertension. So I think that in these vulnerable age groups also PCT testing is very important.
Sir, since you have mentioned about the what you can say, the immunocompromised profile also, as well as the comorbidities, can you please highlight what are the associated comorbidities where PCT levels can actually fluctuate?
Yes. So as I have told that in associated comorbidities, like if a patient has renal insufficiency, the patients have liver cirrhosis, patients have pancreatitis. So these are the causes where the PCT levels might fluctuate, might increase when the patient does not actually have a bacterial infection. So this has to be kept in mind. This has to be ruled out. Whenever we see at an elevated PCT value, we must see whether the patient has any comorbidities or not. Because if the patient is a patient with chronic renal failure or a patient alcoholic liver disease, patient with pancreatitis, then we need to know that this level increase might be due to these comorbidities also. So these things need to be kept in mind while looking at an increased PCT value.
Sir, I really thank you, because you have actually cited few references on the studies and comparisons also. And yes, as a matter of fact, I actually read few of them, like the Smolovsky et al. And Berger et al. Papers.
Yes.
So
yes.
I just want to know, this is my individual question from my perspective. Sir, what would you suggest comparing with all the studies which has been done in Europe and in US? Because unfortunately, we do not have a standard guideline over here. We lack that kind of a, like, as you have said, that it has been misused also a lot.
Yes.
What is the current trend as far as the PCT testing is concerned, and how, I mean to say, what are the baseline features which should be kept in mind while we are actually doing a PCT diagnosis?
So, given the current scenario, a lot of things need to be kept in mind. Like first, when a patient comes, I have said this should not be stressed further that the proper history taking is essential. History of antibiotic therapy, whether the patient is having any comorbidities or not, this should be taken into account. And after the PCT report comes, and in a resource limited setting, whereas in India, other than the big corporate hospitals, there are problem in resources. Like we don't have facilities for PCT testing in the primary health centers or the other places. So I feel personally, and it's my request to the government, that PCT testing should be available at all centers. If not the sensitive branch PCT assays, at least the quantitative, semi-quantitative test might be launched by the government even in primary health centers and BPHs, so that patients with sepsis, by the time they reach the tertiary cities or the tertiary hospitals, a lot of time is lost in the transport of this patient. So that is my personal opinion, that this should be kept in mind. Other than this, when we see at the PCT value, we should correlate with the history and the other comorbidities, that what the patient is actually suffering for, whether the patient is having bacterial infection. Also, single time testing will not do. I know this is costly, but then as I have said, due to its elimination half-life of 24 hours, a daily and serial measurement is very important, and it has a good prognostic value. So my suggestion is that other than testing on the arrival of the patient, it should be serially tested. An appropriate decision with regards to the treatment should be taken, not only whether to start or stop the antibiotics, but also a path towards the diagnosis of the patient. So this, in my opinion, should be kept in mind. There should be a dedicated team which should include microbiologists, which unfortunately in most of the hospitals are not included, but microbiologists should be involved in this team, and the team members should decide whether or not to stop antibiotics, whether the infection is bacterial or not. So all these things need to be kept in mind, in my humble opinion.
Sir, now switching over to CRP, I really thank you, because you have made one bold statement and it is very clear, because I think people were having some kind of doubt over there, was that there is a direct correlation between COVID infection and CRP. Now,
Yes.
if I have to look into that perspective, people are asking that since that particular comparison and other studies were done during the very first wave.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What
Yes.
is your take with respect to the mutations that has taken after that, especially the Delta variant, Delta plus, and the forthcoming variants? How
Yes.
do you think that CRP testing is going to be valid enough or genuine enough in the diagnosis, actually?
Yeah, actually, in my humble opinion, all these variants which have been in circulation, which have been released, what we know of those variants is that they have increased transmissibility and increased infectivity. But the basic thing remains clear, that the cytokine storm, which is the hallmark in COVID-19, severe COVID-19 pneumonia, that holds good. Whatever might be the mutation, ultimately, those patients which become serious, they will have the cytokine storm. So CRP testing will have its role irrespective of the variant, because the variant changes will only influence the infectivity and transmissibility. But the basic pathogenesis will always remain the same. So I, in my opinion, feel that no matter which variant or which mutant variant comes, CRP testing should hold its place in the treatment for COVID-19.
That is sir, I really thank you, because at one of the slides you have mentioned the very first case, that was the Wong et al. Paper.
Yes.
Came last year, actually, because that is a widely cited reference point.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
sir, somebody has asked that after the second outbreak, especially this year, especially in May and everything, since then, we never had any comparative study, but it has been found that CRP testing actually went ahead, and they just want to know how much CRP testing is valid with respect to COVID recovered patients, and that too with comorbidities. How much it is valid, and what kind of scenario do you really respond to? Like, what are you observing?
So, with respect to the CRP testing in post-COVID patients, now the CRP has this problem that it has a larger elimination half-life, and it has been seen that it remains elevated for a long time, 3 to 7 days post the inflammatory cascade is over. So that way, we need to judge the patient clinically also. So as we all know, as I have discussed earlier, that when a patient with COVID-19 pneumonia comes, we measure the baseline CRP at increased levels of greater than 40. There's a high chance of progression to severe disease. Thereafter, we measure every 48 hours to 72 hours. So once the patient is clinically recovered, then after that, I don't think there is much role in the measurement of CRP, because it will be elevated for some time, because it has a larger elimination half-life, and it is seen that it remains elevated for 3 to 7 days post the recovery. So after the patient is clinically recovered, the patient's oxygen saturation returns to normal, lung capacity returns to normal, patient is shifted from the ICU to the ward, is maintaining oxygen saturation on room air. So that time also increased CRP levels, I think that will remain increased for a few days. Again, another thing is that we need to also consider the comorbidities. Like in some comorbidities, CRP levels are increased. So that needs to be kept in mind. In my personal opinion, the patient's clinical judgment is of paramount importance. So initially when the patient comes, baseline CRP testing, that is very important, because at values greater than 40 mg per L, there's a high chance of progression to severe disease. But after the patient is recovered, I think after that clinical recovery, CRP testing immediately does not have much role, because it will remain elevated for some time because of its larger time for clearance from the body as compared to procalcitonin in bacterial infections.
That's a brilliant way you have explained the whole progression, sir. I do have a last question to you, and this is from Dr. Ashok Ratan, sir. He's asking for your expert comments. He's stating that in UK, when a patient is presented with respiratory symptoms, the antibiotics immediately are not prescribed before doing a POCT CRP.
Yes.
Okay. So what are your comments on this?
Yes, that's the ideal way to do. I thank sir that to bring this topic to the forefront. Yes, that's what I am saying, that PCT not only should guide the decision whether the infection is bacterial or not, it should also have a role in antimicrobial stewardship. This cannot be stressed any further, because baseline POCT testing, that's what I was telling also, that I would request the government to make available point of care testing for PCT. Might be semi-quantitative in nature, but if these rapid cut tests are available in the BPHCs and PHCs, decisions as regard to antibiotic therapy might be made. As sir has said, in the UK, without testing for a baseline PCT level at point of care, we don't start antibiotic therapy. That should be the ideal situation across the globe. Unfortunately, here in not in all cases it's happening, but I will be optimistic, and I will ask the government to make available the point of care PCT testing in the health center level, so that when patients are coming with suspected sepsis, rather than starting imipenem and meropenem directly, we can have a decision on seeing the PCT levels, because not all infections are bacterial in nature, and not all cases require imipenem and meropenem.
I think what you can say prophesized and what you have suggested, I think that is the whole virtue of seminars like this, that we can take up the voice up further to all the concerned authorities, and they should listen to it. Yes. So I take this opportunity to thank you, Dr. Palith, for this wonderful presentation and clearing all the queries from the participants and the doubts. And I really think that somehow or other we are all connected, and we can definitely look forward to much more challenging, addressing these kind of pandemics and the comorbidities, as you have mentioned, and talking about the balanced nature of testing as far as PCT and CRP is concerned. And from a company perspective, it would be our moral duty to address to all those by providing economical kits also. So constantly we are working on that also.
Yes.
So before I end up, sir, I would like to present you with a certificate of appreciation to you, sir. I really thank you for all your hard work and the suggestions which you have given, sir. This is just electronic copy of the certificate. You will be soon getting a hard copy of it. Our company representative will be presenting you.
Okay.
So once again, Dr. Pale, it was wonderful to hear from you. And
Thank
I
you.
thank all the participants who have come on board for today's presentation. Please
Yes.
stay tuned for our next ventures also, and we will be posting our schedule in the social media. So stay tuned to that. Till then, a very good evening to all of you, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.